David Jon Gilmour was born on 6 March 1946 in Cambridge, England, the second child of Sylvia, a teacher and film editor, and Douglas Gilmour, a senior lecturer in zoology at Cambridge University. The family lived comfortably in a large Victorian house on Mill Road, filled with books, classical records, and the faint smell of pipe tobacco. David grew up tall, shy, and left-handed, with a mop of dark hair and a voice that cracked early into a soft baritone. His first guitar arrived at Christmas 1960, a cheap Spanish acoustic from Woolworths. Within months he had traded up to Herfner Club 60 Electric and was copying Hank Marvin's Benz note for note. He spent entire summers locked in his bedroom with a reel-to-reel tape recorder, playing along to the Shadows, the Beatles, and anything by Lead Belly or Bob Dylan he could find. At the Peirce School, he was a middling student who preferred the art room to maths. He formed his first band, Jokers Wild, in 1963, singing harmony and playing lead in smoky Cambridge pubs for £10 a night. In 1965, he left for London with a duffel bag, a Telecaster copy, and the vague ambition of becoming a professional musician. For almost 2 years, Gilmour survived as a session guitarist and occasional fashion model while studying A-level French at the Cambridge Technical College. In the summer of 1965, he joined a band called Bullet with Rick Wills and 2 future members of the Pretty Things. They drove a battered van to the south of France, busking on the streets of Saint-Tropez for meals and petrol. It was in France that he reconnected with an old Cambridge grammar school friend, Roger Keith's Syd Barrett. Syd was now fronting a bizarre psychedelic group called the Pink Floyd Sound. David watched them play a gig in a tiny club, stunned by Syd's slide work and the liquid light projections. The 2 friends spent the rest of the summer driving around Europe in a battered Austin Westminster, Syd already showing the first flickers of what would later be called LSD-induced psychosis. By December 1967, Syd Barrett was disintegrating on stage, detuning his guitar, staring into the lights, sometimes refusing to play at all. Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Rick Wright made a panicked decision. They would bring in David Gilmour as a 5th member to cover Syd's parts while Syd remained the artistic genius frontman. David's first gig was 12 January 1968 at Aston University. Syd didn't show up. Within weeks, the arrangement became permanent. On 6 April 1968, the band announced that Syd Barrett was no longer a member of Pink Floyd. David, aged 22, was now the lead guitarist and co-lead singer of one of the strangest bands in London. The first post-Barrett album, A Saucerful of Secrets 1968, contains only one Syd song and the first Gilmour lead vocal, Let There Be More Light. David's guitar style, slow, vocal-like bends, long sustained notes, and an almost liquid tone, began to define the band's new sound. He sang most of the leads on the half-live, half-studio Ummagumma 1969, and contributed the soaring Lapse deal on Fat Old Son from Adam Hartmother 1970. Metal 1971 was the turning point. Echoes, a 23-minute suite, showcased the classic 4-man chemistry, Gilmour's lyrical guitar weaving around Waters' brooding bass, Wright's cathedral keyboards, and Mason's tidal drums. David's 4-note motif at the beginning remains one of the most recognizable openings in rock. In January 1972, the band premiered a new piece called Eclipse, later The Dark Side of the Moon, at the Brighton Dome. David was now 26, married to his first wife Ginger, and living in a farmhouse in Roydon, Essex. He co-wrote Breathe, sang lead on Time and Breathe Reprise, and delivered the guitar solos that would be analyzed note for note by generations of teenagers. Dark Side, released March 1973, stayed on the US charts for 741 weeks. David's solos on Time and Money became guitar exam standards. The 1974-75 tour were the biggest in rock history up to that point. David flew his own light aircraft between shows. Wish You Were Here 1975 was made in the shadow of Syd Barrett's Ghost. David sang the aching Wish You Were Here acoustic verses and played the iconic 12-string intro that still makes grown men weep in stadiums 50 years later. On 5 June 1975, during the mixing of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a shaved-head, overweight stranger wandered into Studio 3. It was Syd. David wept in the control room. Animals 1977 was Roger Waters' show, but David's guitar on Dogs, 17 Minutes of Controlled Fury, is widely regarded as his finest hour. The Wall 1979-80 pushed him further into the background vocally, though his solo on Comfortably Numb is routinely voted the greatest in rock history. Tensions boiled over during the Final Cut 1983. Roger wanted total control, David wanted melody. Roger fired Rick Wright, David refused to tour the Final Cut. In December 1985, Roger Waters announced he was leaving Pink Floyd and tried legally to dissolve the band. David and Nick Mason refused to let it die. Against all odds, David took the helm. A Momentary, Lapse of Reason 1987 and The Division Bell 1994 sold 30 million copies combined. The 1987, 89, and 1994 tour were gargantuan. Floating beds, circular screens, and David's Stratocaster howling over 100,000 people in places like Venice and Moscow. Learning to Fly, Sorrow, and High Hopes became new classics. In July 2005, he reunited with Roger Waters for 4 songs at Live 8, the last time the classic lineup ever played together. David's solo albums are quieter affairs. David Gilmour 1978 contained the gorgeous There's No Way Out of Here. About Face 1984 rocked harder. On an Island 2006 was made with his second wife, novelist and lyricist Polly Sampson, married 1994, and featured orchestrations by Zbigniew Preissner and guest appearances by David Crosby and Graham Nash. It debuted at #1 in the UK. Rattle That Lock 2015 and Luck and Strange 2024 continued the pattern, autumnal, reflective, and drenched in that unmistakable Strat tone. The title track of Luck and Strange features the voice of Rick Wright, recorded in 2007 at David's houseboat studio, the Astoria. David and Polly raised 4 children on the Astoria and in their Sussex farmhouse. He flies helicopters, collects vintage aircraft, and has given away tens of millions to charity, most famously buying the house for the charity crisis and helping fund housing for the homeless. He sold his guitar collection for $21 million in 2019 and donated every penny to climate causes. He lost his dearest musical brother, Rick Wright, to cancer in 2008. The 2015-16 Rattle That Lock tour ended with Rick's daughter Gayla singing The Great Gig in the Sky while David stood silently in the shadows, tears running down his face. At 79, David Gilmour still plays better than almost anyone half his age. In September 2024, he released Luck and Strange, his highest-charting solo album ever. The accompanying shows at the Royal Albert Hall and Circo Massimo in Rome were rapturously received. Reviewers used the word transcendent without irony. He rarely gives interviews, hates social media, and still answers the phone himself at his management office. When asked why he keeps making music, he says simply, "Because I still hear things in my head that haven't been played yet." For half a century, whenever the world needed a guitar to sound like the human soul trying to reach the stars, David Gilmour has been there, quiet, courteous, and utterly devastating. His final word on Pink Floyd came in 2014, "It's over, I'm done, but the music is." And every night, somewhere on Earth, a lone Stratocaster cries those 4 descending notes from Shine on You Crazy Diamond, and millions of people still look up at the sky and feel less alone.